The MBTA Commuter Rail system serves as the commuter rail arm of the Massachusetts Bay Transportation Authority's transportation coverage of Greater Boston in the United States. It is operated under contract by Keolis, which took over operations on July 1, 2014 from the Massachusetts Bay Commuter Railroad Company. The system is the sixth-busiest commuter rail in the U.S., behind the New York, Chicago, and Philadelphia area systems, and is tied for fifth-busiest with Philadelphia's SEPTA regional rail in terms of weekday ridership. The line's characteristic purple-trimmed coaches operate as far south as North Kingstown, Rhode Island, and as far north as Newburyport and as far west as Worcester, both in Massachusetts. Trains originate at two major terminals in Boston: South Station and North Station, both transportation hubs offering connections to Amtrak, local bus, and subway lines. In the third quarter of 2014, daily weekday ridership was 129,800. Current lines. The following lines terminate at South Station: Greenbush Line, Old Colony lines, consisting of Kingston-Plymouth Line, Middleborough-Lakeville Line, Fairmount Line, Providence-Staunton Line, Franklin Line, Needham Line, Framingham-Worcester Line. The following lines terminate at North Station: Fitchburg Line, Lowell Line, Haverhill Line, Newburyport-Rockport Line. Operational history. Consolidation under MBTA control. Boston and Maine Railroad. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts's involvement with the operating facets of commuter rail began in 1967 when the Boston and Maine Railroad petitioned the Interstate Commerce Commission to discontinue all passenger services. Service north of the state line was discontinued, but most service in Massachusetts was preserved through a contract between the Commonwealth and the B&M, at this time still an independent railroad company. The Commonwealth and MBTA began to purchase several lines, like the Lowell Line between Somerville and Wilmington, from the B&M. In 1969 the B&M transported 24,000 passengers every weekday on 4 separate routes. Its yearly deficit was $3.2 million. A pool of 86 Bud Rail diesel cars protected the service. B&M filed for bankruptcy protection in 1970. All remaining B&M commuter assets, with the exception of yard tracks and freight-only branches, were sold to the Commonwealth on December 14, 1976, though B&M was contracted to operate the service using its existing fleet of diesel rail cars. New York, New Haven and Hartford Railroad. The New York, New Haven and Hartford Railroad, the longtime operator of most South Station commuter trains, filed for bankruptcy for the last time in 1961. 2 years earlier in 1959, NH discontinued passenger service on the Old Colony Division in southeastern Massachusetts. NH was included in the Penn Central Transportation Company merger in 1968, which itself filed bankruptcy in 1970. MBTA purchased many PC Southside commuter lines on January 27, 1973, including the Providence-Staunton line as far as the Rhode Island border plus the branch to Staunton, the Franklin line and Needham line and the Framingham-Worcester line from Riverside to Framingham, as well as a number of abandoned lines and lines without passenger service including the Old Colony Main line from Boston to Braintree and the Plymouth-Kingston line. PC merged into Conrail on April 1, 1976. The MBTA bought the equipment but Conrail took over operations of the Southside lines. The MBTA also purchased the Fairmount line to restore it for passenger service as a bypass during Southwest Corridor reconstruction. New York Central Railroad, the Framingham-Worcester line, historically part of the Boston and Albany Railroad, was merged into the New York Central Railroad and its ownership subsequently passed to PC in 1968. As part of the Massachusetts Turnpike Boston Extension's construction in the 1960s, the Worcester Line's roadbed between Route 128 and Boston was sold to the Massachusetts Turnpike Authority, with the proviso that the control of the railroad remain with NYC. Conrail inherited the line which formed a vital freight artery between Boston's Beacon Yard and Conrail's Selkirk Yard. The Riverside-Framingham section was sold to the MBTA in 1976 as part of their larger acquisition of PC commuter assets, but the section past Framingham remained in Conrail control. In September 2009, Conrail's successor CSX Transportation and the Commonwealth finalized a $100 million agreement to purchase CSX's Framingham to Worcester tracks, as well as the Grand Junction Railroad Plus lines, which will be part of the South Coast Rail project, to improve service on the Framingham-Worcester line. After several years of construction and negotiations, ownership of the line was transferred to the Commonwealth on October 4, 2012, with increased service on the outer section of the line beginning several weeks later. Combined operations. The Northeast Rail Service Act of 1981 compelled Conrail to transfer operations of all passenger and commuter services to local transit authorities, resulting in Conrail ceasing all subsidized passenger rail services. B&M won the contract for the South Side lines. For the first time, all Boston commuter service was operated by one entity. After bankruptcy, B&M continued to operate trains under the protection of the Federal Bankruptcy Court, in the hopes that a reorganization could make it profitable again. It emerged from the court's protection when Timothy Mellon's Guilford Transportation Industries bought it in 1983. GTI let the contract expire in 1987, after a bitter strike had shut down most of the North Side lines in 1986. From 1987 to 2003, Amtrak managed all of Boston's commuter rail. The relationship between MBTA and Amtrak was often rocky, and Amtrak did not submit a bid when the contract expired in 2003. MBTA observers saw Amtrak as having been a reliable manager and operator, but Amtrak sometimes experienced strained relations with the MBTA. Quibbles centered on equipment failures, crewing issues about the number of conductors per train, and responsibility for late trains. Because of these issues, and Amtrak's repeated statements that the MBTA contract was unreasonable, few were surprised at Amtrak's decision not to bid again. Two tenders were submitted, one from GTI and another from the newly formed Massachusetts Bay Commuter Railroad Company, a partnership between Connex, Bombardier Transportation and Alternate Concepts, Incorporated, the latter of which won the tender. MBCA took over the MBTA Commuter Rail operation from Amtrak in July 2003. The MBCA contract originally expired in July 2008 but had an additional 5-year option. It was later extended 3 years to July 2011 and then another 2 to July 2013. After concerns about on-time performance, the 2011 extension increased the fine for late trains from $100 to $300. In August 2012, MBCA and Keolis commuter services were the two bidders for the contract. On January 8, 2014, the MBTA awarded Keolis the contract for $2.68 billion over 8 years, with the possibility of two 2-year extensions that could bring the total price to $4.3 billion. Keolis took over the operations on July 1, 2014. Service changes since MBTA takeover. Expansions. Several significant improvements have been made during MBTA's period of stewardship, which started circa 1973. However, the Commonwealth support for rail operations began in the 1950s with contracted operations and subsidies to railroads providing commuter service, and more so in 1964 with the advent of MBTA. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts pioneered the concept of park and ride by providing funds to construct the Route 128 station on NH's Providence Line, at a location where the radial line intersected with the Massachusetts Route 128, locally thought of as the Boston Beltway. Route 128 station was established 1953 by NH President Frederick C. Domain, Jr. The initial station was simple in design, built as a parking lot located next to the tracks. B&M's Eastern Route formerly operated across the bridge at Merrimack River and as far north as Portsmouth, New Hampshire on the former Eastern Railroad alignment. Service past Ipswich to Newburyport was limited to a single daily round trip after 1967, and suspended in April 1976. Freight service to Newburyport lasted until 1984. And the line was formally abandoned in 1994 even as preparations began for restored service. After a brief period of abandonment, commuter rail service to Newburyport resumed on October 26, 1998, with an infill stop at Rowley. As part of the Northeast Corridor Improvement Program 2 of the 1990s, MBTA's Providence line was electrified using federal funds provided to Amtrak for its ASLA Express project. However, MBTA does not operate electric equipment on the Providence line, as such equipment would be unusable on other lines. As Big Dig environmental mitigation, MBTA invested heavily in the commuter rail system by restoring large sections of NH's Old Colony Division, which was abandoned in 1959. Service along the two main Old Colony lines was re-established in 1997, and the Greenbush line opened in 2007. After 1975, Framingham-Worcester line service was cut back to Framingham, though other lines reached exurbs more distant from Boston than Framingham. As compensation for delays in the Old Colony line's restoration, rush-hour service to Worcester Union Station was restored in 1994, with infill stations at Ashland, Southborough, Westborough, and Grafton stations were added in the Metro West region between 2000 and 2002. The service was successful, resulting in relative de-emphasis of Amtrak and commuter bus services operating in the same corridor. During the 1979 to 1987 reconstruction of the Southwest Corridor, Amtrak and MBTA trains were diverted over the Dorchester branch, which had not seen passenger traffic since 1944. As part of this project, MBTA allowed centralized traffic control to be installed on this branch, greatly increasing its signal capacity. Regular service was kept on the Fairmount line after 1987 because the relocated service was popular with residents of Dorchester and Roxbury. As Big Dig mitigation, MBTA rebuilt existing stations and is adding 4 new stations along the line. The first of these, Talbot Avenue, opened on November 12, 2012, followed by Newmarket and Four Corners Geneva Avenue on July 1, 2013. Agreement with the state of Rhode Island allowed MBTA's Attleboro line to extend to Providence, Rhode Island during the late 1990s. At first, only weekday service was provided. In the mid-2000s, a new agreement with RIDOT provided funding to allow the service to operate on weekends also. Service was extended further south to T.F. Green Airport in Warwick, Rhode Island in December 2010 and to Wickford Junction in North Kingstown in April 2012. This represents the first commuter service in Rhode Island south of Providence since 1981. In 2013, the Cape Flyer service began running from South Station to Hyannis on summer weekends, the first direct service from Boston to Cape Cod since 1959. Though officially a Cape Cod Regional Transit Authority service, the Cape Flyer uses MBTA equipment. Should this pilot service be successful, regular commuter service may be extended from Middleborough Lakeville to Buzzards Bay. On August 12, 2013, MBTA broke ground on a 4.5-mile extension of the Fitchburg line to a new planned watch-use-it commuter rail station in West Fitchburg. The new terminal will include an 800-foot-long high platform on a siding off the main track and parking for 360 cars. The extension project also includes a train layover facility in Westminster. On November 14, 2013, MBTA began rehabilitating and rebuilding the tracks along 33 miles of right-of-way the agency acquired to restore service to Fall River and New Bedford. Contractions equals. During the period of MBTA control, services have also been curtailed. Commuter rail services along the Millis Branch and Dam Branch, by 1966 consisting of only a single daily rush-hour round trip, were discontinued by the NYNH and H on April 21, 1967 and have not been replaced. All former B&M services that extended north of the Massachusetts border were curtailed by 1967, except for a brief period of experimental service from January 28, 1980 to March 1, 1981. Since then, restoration and extension of the Lowell line to Nashua, Manchester, and Concord, New Hampshire, and the Haverhill line to Portland, Maine, have been repeatedly discussed. In 2001, Amtrak commenced operation of the Downeaster between Boston's North Station and Portland under the auspices of the Northern New England Passenger Rail Authority. The Nashua service discussion is continuing in the context of the widening of Interstate 93 in New Hampshire. The B&M operated one daily round trip to South Sudbury over the former Central Massachusetts Railroad until its discontinuation on November 26, 1971. Passenger service on the Lexington branch ended on January 10, 1977. The northwest extension of the MBTA Red Line replaced the service as far as Alewife in West Cambridge. No commuter rail service reaches the towns of Arlington, Lexington, and Bedford, Massachusetts. Today, the rail bank line forms the Minuteman Bikeway and has a linear park in the vicinity of Davis Square, Somerville. The southern half of the Woburn Loop still operated when the MBTA took over control, joining the Lowell Line at Winchester. Half the Lowell Line services terminated at Woburn Heights, while the others stopped at North Woburn and continued to Lowell. Weekend service ended on September 7, 1980, and all service on the branch stopped on January 30, 1981. The Fitchburg Line under B&M operations terminated at Ayer, Massachusetts, but was subsequently extended as far as Gardner, Massachusetts in January 1981. However, the service between Gardner and Fitchburg was ended at the end of 1986 after the parallel Massachusetts Route 2 was upgraded to expressway standards, reducing travel time between these cities. Equipment. All MBTA commuter rail service is provided by push-pull trains powered by diesel locomotives with a cab car on the opposite end. Trains typically have 4 to 8 coaches and seat between 400 and 1,400 passengers. Approximately 58 train sets are needed for weekday service. The primary heavy maintenance facility is the MBTA Commuter Rail Maintenance Facility, located in East Somerville on the former site of the Boston and Maine's Boston Engine Terminal. It is also used for midday and overnight storage of trains on the North Side lines. Southampton Street Yard and the Reedville Interim Layover Facility are used for light maintenance and layover service. Various other layover facilities are used for midday and overnight storage. Most are located near the outer ends of the lines. Locomotive fleet equals, as of July 2015, the MBTA owned 125 locomotives. Of these, 89 were in active passenger service, 4 used for work service, 20 inactive for various reasons, and 12 still awaiting delivery or acceptance. The current fleet of diesel locomotives comprises a mix of purpose-built passenger locomotives and freight locomotives rebuilt for passenger use. All passenger locomotives are equipped with head-end power, though some locomotives exclusively used for non-revenue work service do not. 7X Amtrak MDF 40PH locomotives are currently leased from Rail World for temporary use while the remainder of the HSP 46 order is accepted. Coach fleet equals. As of January 2015, the MBTA owned 481 coaches. Of these, 409 were in active service, 64 inactive for various purposes, and 8 still awaiting delivery. Coaches whose designations start with BTC are conventional coaches, while those starting with CTC are cab cars. Cab cars will occasionally also appear in the middle of a consist. Coaches acquired before 1990 were single-level cars with 88 to 127 seats. Those since are bi-level cars with 173 to 185 seats. Various coaches are equipped with electronic doors for use on the Old Colony lines and Greenbush line, which have full-length high-level platforms at all stops. All BTC3, CTC3, BTC4C, and BTC4D coaches have restrooms. Trains usually have one of these cars adjacent to the locomotive, as that car will be platformed at all high-level platforms regardless of length, and thus handicapped riders will be able to access the restroom car. During winter months, a ski train serving Wachusett Mountain runs on the Fitchburg Line, using a coach car which is equipped for carrying bicycles or skis. During summer months, some Newburyport-Rockport line trains to Rockport include one of 2 cars equipped to carry bicycles. The Cape Flyer uses Car 224, which has been modified as a cafe and baggage car. Retired equipment equals. As the Commonwealth assumed the control of the commuter rail during the 1970s, it inherited various non-standard equipment from predecessor railroads. These included numerous butt rail diesel cars, including a total of 86 from the B&M, New Haven Railroad and SEPTA. The RDC fleet was depowered in the 1970s and turned into locomotive-hauled coaches by Morris and Knudsen. These became known as Boise Buds, after the location of the MK shop where the work was done. The RDC fleet was phased out during the 1980s and completely replaced with conventional coaches by 1989. Remaining examples of these units now serve on the Grand Canyon Railway and Hobo Railroad. A derelict pair sit on a disused track near North Station, and a single unit has been restored and is displayed at Bedford Depot. Indiana, 1978-80 MBTA acquired 19 rebuilt MDF-P10 units which were later transferred to Metro-North Railroad in 1991 to 1993. MDG-P9s were also operated in Boston suburban service. MBTA number 904, one of 6 GP9s received from SEMTA in 1987, is retained as a work engine. XGO Transit stainless steel coaches were operated as an interim solution pending delivery of the CTC1/BTC1 order. From 2002 to 2004, MBTA leased some retired Amtrak F40PHs while the F40PH M2CS were getting rebuilt. Wi-Fi. Free Wi-Fi internet service with limited bandwidth is provided on all trains. A two-tiered model where riders can pay extra for faster service is planned to be implemented in 2015. The program started with a $262,000 pilot in January 2008 on the Worcester line, where 45 coaches were fitted with routers which connected to cellular data networks. This was the first Wi-Fi available on a commuter rail service in the United States. The Worcester line was chosen for the pilot phase in part to compensate for low on-time performance, as well as to test the service across the line's varied terrain. The program was considered successful. In December 2008, the MBTA announced that Wi-Fi would be available on all trains by mid-2009. 258 of the 410 coaches then owned by the MBTA would receive Wi-Fi equipment at a rate of about 30 per month. In July 2014, the MBTA announced that a private company would be building a new $5.6 million network to replace the 2008-built network. The MBTA is not paying for the new network. Instead, the company expects to recoup its investment by providing a two-tiered offering. Free limited bandwidth Wi-Fi will continue to be provided, along with local television broadcasts. A monthly fee will be charged by the company for access to higher bandwidth and other broadcasts, with 7.5% of the fee returned to the MBTA. The new system is to be completed in 2015 and the revenue agreement extends to 2037. Fare policy. The MBTA Commuter Rail uses a fare zone policy whereby origin and destination stations are not individually priced, but assigned a zone based on distance from Boston. There are a total of 11 zones with an increasing fare to or from Boston the higher the zone number. Zone 1A fares are the least expensive and cost the same as rapid transit, while the highest priced Zone 10 fares are $11 per ride. Travel between suburban zones without going to Boston is charged in inter-zone fare based on the number of zones traveled. Seniors, those with a disability, and middle and high school students with proper identification receive a 50% discounted rate. Children under 11 travel free with a paying adult. Fares are collected by train conductors and while fare evasion is explicitly illegal, it is not criminal. Tickets may be purchased at automatic vending machines located in principal stations and at suburban stations from nearby businesses and vendors. Stations without ticketing machines or vendors can purchase tickets on board. Alternatively, riders can use the MBTA M-Ticket app to purchase tickets on iPhone and Android devices, which allows them to display their tickets on their mobile phone screens rather than presenting paper tickets or passes. Travelers can purchase tickets as a one-way, round-trip, 10-ride, or monthly pass. Ridership levels on the commuter rail have grown since the MBTA's involvement began in the late 1960s, with overall average weekday ridership growing from 29,500 in 1969 to 76,000 in 1990 and 143,700 in 2008. This was accomplished by a series of rationalizations, such as closing lightly used lines, concentrating service on heavily utilized lines, and reopening formerly abandoned branches with high traffic potential, such as the old colony lines. A general growth of transit usage in the northeastern United States also contributed. Growing ridership in this way required substantial capital investment, which was provided by a mixture of federal mass transit funds and Commonwealth transportation bond issues. Train operations. Like most commuter railroads in the northeastern United States, MBTA is an NORAC railroad and uses the rule book promulgated by that organization. Much of MBTA Commuter Rail is Rule 251 territory, as the tracks are signaled for movement in one direction of travel only. During the 1990s, parts of the system, such as the Framingham-Worcester line, were re-signaled to allow a more advanced mode of operations known as NORAC Rule 261, which allows trains to operate in either direction on both tracks where double track is available. During the morning rush hour, both tracks can be simultaneously used for inbound traffic, allowing one train to make local stops while an express train overtakes the local train. On each train, the cab car is attached at the end closest to the downtown Boston terminal station for the particular line, and the locomotive is attached at the end farthest from the terminal station. On each train serving the North Station lines, the ADA coach used to carry mobility limited persons is attached right behind the locomotive, allowing level boarding at all suburban stations featuring mini-high platforms. On the other hand, on each train serving the South Station lines, the cab car also serves as the ADA coach. Train line doors that open automatically via central control are available on some equipment, but at low-level platforms the conductor in each car must manually open a trap to allow passengers to descend via stairs onto the platform. Proposed expansions. South Station lines equals. An extension of the Staunton line known as South Coast Rail is set to break ground to bring service to Taunton, Fall River, and New Bedford, Massachusetts. Routes through Attleboro and Middleborough were considered for the service but rejected. Critics argue that building the extension does not make economic sense. In September 2010, the MBTA completed a study to determine the feasibility of extending regular commuter rail service to Foxborough via the Franklin line. Currently, the station is only served during special events at Gillette Stadium. The study looked at extending some Fairmount line service to Foxborough, running shuttle trains from Foxborough to Walpole, or a combination of both. No determination has been made as to if or when this service would begin. A Providence line extension to Wickford Junction, in North Kingstown, Rhode Island opened on April 23, 2012. The Rhode Island Department of Transportation is also studying the feasibility of serving existing Amtrak stations in Kingston and Westerly as well as constructing new stations in Cranston, East Greenwich, and west of Isville. Federal funding has also been provided for preliminary planning of a new station in Pawtucket. There is also a proposal to extend the Middleborough-Lakeville line to Wareham and eventually to Buzzards Bay. The Cape Flyer started service along this section to Hyannis on summer weekends in 2013. A proposal was announced in 2012 to construct a new station on the Framingham-Worcester line to service Brighton, near an expanded campus of New Balance. This station, named Boston Landing, is slated to open in 2016. In September 2013, the state announced plans to run diesel multiple-unit service between Back Bay and the Boston Convention and Exhibition Center on Track 61 beginning in 2015. In 2014, the MBTA announced it would purchase DMU self-propelled rail cars for the Fairmount line with eventual expansion to 5 other lines, including Track 61, to be known as the Indigo Line. A new West Station is planned to be built on the Framingham-Worcester line in the Beacon Park Yard site, where it may also connect to North Station via the Grand Junction Railroad. North Station lines equals. On October 18, 2010, MBTA broke ground on an extension of the Fitchburg Line 4.5 miles to a new Wachusett stop beyond the current terminal at Fitchburg Station. This extension is part of a larger improvement of the line, including upgraded high-level platforms at both South Acton and Littleton are also planned, as well as a second main track is planned between South Acton and Air Junction, eliminating one of the single-track bottlenecks on the line. These improvements will speed the line so that the Fitchburg to Boston trip would take only about an hour. The extension was funded by a $55.5 million transportation investment generating economic recovery grant. There is a proposal to build a South Salem station in Salem, Massachusetts, to improve access to Salem State University, as well as to extend commuter rail to Peabody, Massachusetts and Danvers, Massachusetts. The former State Secretary of Transportation James A. Loezy had also indicated support for commuter service from Worcester to North Station via Clinton and Air, presumably along the Worcester, Nashua and Rochester Railroad right-of-way, owned by Pan Am Railways as of 2009. The state of New Hampshire has created the New Hampshire Rail Transit Authority and allocated money to build platforms at Nashua and Manchester. An article in the Eagle Tribune claims that Massachusetts is negotiating to buy property which has the potential to extend the Haverhill line to Plaistow, New Hampshire. Funding is available, and Plaistow is potentially interested, but wants to better understand the potential drawbacks of being the location of the layover station. North-South rail link equals. No direct connection exists between the two downtown commuter rail terminals. To travel from one station to the other, passengers must use the MBTA subway or bus lines to make the connection. Passengers using the Providence, Staunton, Framingham, Worcester, Franklin, and Needham lines can transfer to and from North Station via the Orange Line subway, connecting at Back Bay. Passengers using the Fitchburg line can transfer to and from South Station via the Red Line subway, connecting at Porter. All other passengers have to change subway trains at either Park Street or Downtown Crossing stations, thus requiring two distinct subway lines to complete a trip between North and South stations. A North-South rail link has been proposed to unite the two halves of the commuter rail system. But, because of the high cost, Massachusetts has, as of May 2006, withdrawn its sponsorship of the proposal. Meanwhile, for non-revenue transfers of equipment, the MBTA and Amtrak use the Grand Junction Railroad Company main line. Freight service. On the North Side lines, as part of the original sale agreement, B&M and its successor Pan Am Railways retains perpetual and exclusive trackage rights for freight service. Pan Am provides freight service on those lines. Boston Sand and Gravel has an agreement with Pan Am to operate its short-line New Hampshire North Coast Railroad trains from Ossipee, New Hampshire to just north of Boston's North Station to supply aggregates to its plant on the Boston-Cambridge border. An occasional move occurs with run-through power from Norfolk Southern Railway to supply coal to a power plant in Bow, New Hampshire, over the Fitchburg line. The Haverhill and Fitchburg lines also host 4 to 6 par manifest freight trains per day. On the South Side lines, CSX Transportation retains trackage rights over much of the former New Haven territory. Limited service is also provided by the Providence and Worcester Railroad on the Providence line, principally from Central Falls through Providence towards New Haven. The Bay Colony Railroad provides a limited amount of service on some lines. CSXT used to provide intermodal, autarch, and general merchandise over the Worcester line, a part of CSXT's Boston line. This part of the commuter rail network could host over 12 mainline freight trains per day, including descendants of Conrail's expedited intermodal trail van trains. Currently most freight service terminates in Framingham, and a train load facility in Westboro, with limited freight services through Beacon Park Yard in Allston to a few local customers. In 2013 CSX moved its intermodal service from Beacon Park to an expanded yard in Worcester. On its former Old Colony division, the New York, New Haven and Hartford Railroad essentially vacated its right of freight operations by abandoning the tracks in 1959. As MBTA rebuilt the tracks, it gained freight service rights, and those rights were franchised to Conrail, which provided freight service on the former Old Colony Division. Art and architecture. As parts of their Arts on the Line program, the MBTA has public art at certain commuter rail stations. Large sculptures and murals are present at South Station, Back Bay, and Lynn, while a number of other stations include historic information panels on station signs. See also. References. External links. MBTA, commuter rail schedules and maps, Keolis commuter services, NA Transit, MBTA fleet roster.